we have always been somewhat attracted to, fascinated by, drawn toward, like moths to a flame, the fraudster, the grifter. And in the era of streaming TV, there's something even more attractive about mythologizing these people. So today on The Nose, we are going to talk about two instances of that. One of them, The Dropout, which is about Elizabeth Holmes, founder of Theranos, and then Inventing Anna, which is about Anna Sorokin, founder of nothing, essentially, except although there was supposedly going to be an Anna Sorokin Foundation. Kind of a big-time grift and a medium-size, almost small-time grift in the case of Sorokin, but a lot of other commonalities. And our panel will be discussing Scam TV, our new passion. Hello. So it's The Nose, our weekly cultural roundtable. We're going to do something slightly different. I think we're going to do kind of two conjoined intellectual properties, and they're conjoined primarily in our own minds, but they seem to be part of a trend that you might call fraudster TV. This would include the several documentaries about the Fire Festival. It would include the thing about Pam. And then I think there's a second season coming called The Other Thing About Pam. I don't know who's attached to that project, though. Tinder Swindler, We Crashed. You get the idea. There's a lot of this stuff. But I think two kind of standout properties, if that's the right word, are The Dropout, which is the story of Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos told in 8 parts, and Inventing Anna, which is the story about Anna Sorokin or Anna Delvey, depending on which version of reality you happen to inhabit, told in 9 parts. The former is on Hulu, The Dropout, and Inventing Anna is on Netflix. And they've both been kind of big hits in the world of streaming. So before we get into this, I just want to quickly tell a story. I'm not really sure what the story illustrates, but so in 2016, you may recall in November, somebody named Donald Trump got elected president. That was on a Tuesday, and by Friday, I was like really sick. I think these things were connected, but I was really, really sick. I think we had to cancel The Nose, and then I was sick for weeks, and I just couldn't get better. I'm running this huge temperature and stuff, and I finally get better. And then the company here asked me if I can go out to TEDMed. And there's a TEDMed out in Palm Springs, and they want me there for reasons I won't even go into. So, and I thought, great idea. So I go out there, and the first night there's this like really fancy dinner, and this is Palm Springs too. And it's like, so, and I didn't know anybody. And there was a table that had an empty seat. I asked if I could take it. They said yes. It turned out everybody else there was sort of a biomedical research person who was like either running his or her own lab or running a big university operation or whatever. And they were all talking about Theranos, and they all had financial entanglements, and some people had money in Theranos. And I'd been so involved in the national election, as a lot of people were, I really didn't know what they were talking about. It was December of 2016, which I now know. All of the writing was on the wall by then, but I just had no idea what this was. And I think it is a story that flew a little bit under the radar because we had a different national obsession. So our panel is going to talk about it today. Here we go. Tanisha Dugan is associate professor at Octopus Theatricals. Mercy Quay is founder and principal consultant for the Narrative Project. I think it's also been announced that the CT Mirror Enterprises, CT Mirror Cinematic Universe, is launching a podcast featuring her and Mr. Dankosky. I believe it's called Mercy and the Dude. I'm not sure about that, though. Actually, I floated that title out in the parking lot the other day when I saw Mr. Dankosky. So Bill Yousman is a professor of media studies at Sacred Heart University. So they're all here together, and they're all here to talk first about The Dropout. Then we're going to do a quick pledge break. We'll come back. We will talk more about Inventing Anna. So who's going to get us going here? Let's, Mercy, I know you might be a little bit short on sleep because it's possible you stayed up really late binging one of these two things. But
oh my God, you're just being so dramatic.
That's not bad. That is not bad at all.
So
Thank
basic.
you.
Right. But
It's very basic.
all right. Right. So that's good, but that's the second segment. Now give us your deep, throaty voiced Elizabeth Holmes, because I think that's where we are right now. So let's talk a little bit about The Dropout. Mercy, just in general, I mean, was this something you enjoyed, found engrossing, already knew too much about when you started watching? What was your overall experience?
Yeah, so I knew a great deal about this before I started watching. Because I think around the time that you just described, I was listening to the LA Times put out a podcast called The Dropout. And I was doing work with Yale's Office of Cooperative Research, where we do technology transfer, right? Pulling discoveries out from the lab and into entrepreneurial endeavors. And so this sort of hit close to home for what I was doing at the time. And this for me felt like, well, revisiting the story felt like, okay, well, Mercy, you're an entrepreneur. You're running a business. How aren't you Elizabeth Holmes? And then I heard another voice come into my head and say, well, Mercy, I think one of the things about your business is that it's actually providing a product. And
So
I think
good.
that, thank you. I'm trying. I think in a time where women, particularly women of color, are impacted by their own sense of self-worth and imposter syndrome. The Elizabeth Holmes story is really, I think, a classic American tale. It's a Carnegie tale. It's a Ford tale. She's a self-made billionaire. And did she do it off the backs of others? And did she do it while helping people? While hurting people? Absolutely. And we should recognize that for the pain and suffering that she caused. But I guess the question that comes up for me is, wait, how is that different from Carnegie or Ford? Weren't they awful people as well?
Yeah, I had the same thought watching this. The story of how old money got to be old money is every bit as unattractive and sometimes considerably worse than the kind of fast money grift that we see in these series and lots of other ones. On the other hand, Bill Yousman, and I assume you have your professor hat on right now anyway, there's a way in which we tell these stories right now to make sense of a particular moment. Yes, I think Mercy's right. The stories are kind of eternal, but there's also a way in which we are in a very specific moment right now. And I think we are trying to tell these stories as a way of making sense of that moment. I don't know, maybe you can sort of play off that a little bit.
Yeah, well, I think the first place that I go to, and one of us brought it up in our email exchanges, and I'm sorry, I can't remember who it was, so I can't give proper credit. So I guess I'm just taking advantage of other people's work as well. But, the obvious place to go is, you mentioned 2016, Colin. We're coming off of the ultimate grifter. The grifter of the grifters. He is so much of a grifter that he's not even as much of a grifter as he pretends to be. He pretends, it's just, we're still, I think, reckoning with the hangover of having elected a complete and total fraud who still has, close to half the country bamboozled and brought to the places where we see all the people in these two dramas going, where they're just buying this stuff, even though there is nothing there. That's the commonality between the two shows. But I also think it's the commonality with our recent political moment. There is nothing there, but we are buying it.
Yeah, I mean, Tanisha, another thing that we talked about a lot as we were getting ready for the show is there is this kind of rags to riches parable that does date back to the era of the giants that Mercy's talking about. But it's also very much of the present moment, particularly in the tech sector, but also in the case of Inventing Anna in the New York world of glitterati and trust fund babies and stuff. But in the case of The Dropout, she's already following a game plan that's about inventing something, commodifying it, and getting incredibly rich and famous. And you can sort of understand maybe why that's a dream we have. And there's a lot in Holmes about going for your dream and doing all this stuff. I don't know. Initially, it might seem kind of innocuous, right, to follow your dreams and get a lot of stuff.
I mean, I guess so. There's a couple pieces to it, right? There's the one part, which is that she is following the archetype of venture capitalism in Silicon Valley, which is, I don't even know if I would go so far as to say inventing something, because I don't think that there has to be, to an earlier point, a product that actually exists, but it needs to be an idea. And I don't know what's more American than convincing people to buy into an idea long before it's actually come to fruition. And that is the Silicon Valley dream. In fact, in my work, I'm often like, well, why does that work in this space? But when it comes to sort of making something as small as theater, it doesn't work, but it absolutely works for films, right? I mean, that's exactly the entire premise. You get people on board because you're like, listen to the story I want to tell. Give me your money. So that's not new business. And she followed, I think I said this in our emails. She told us the stories she was following. She said, here are the myths and realities that I'm engaging with. I am going to be like Edison. I am going to dress and build my idea of a leader as in the likeness of Steve Jobs. She wasn't, special in her imaginations. She just was clear-eyed and focused. And that to me is the thing that's the most interesting. Why are we not Elizabeth? I think of you and I, Mercy, because, to use a gendered term, we sometimes have been taught that the balls it takes to do it is not ours to have or ours to carry. Right. But she has balls to do it. And that also, go ahead.
To that point, I also think that it's, specifically women of color have this almost policing tactic of themselves where it's like, listen, am I a phony? And every time you think about being a phony, you work harder to prove your work and to earn your work, right? It's not just the did you get the answer at the bottom of the equation? It's show your work as well. And I don't think that Elizabeth Holmes had any incentive to show her work.
No. So before we go any further, I want to give people kind of a little sense, at least, of the sound of this. I don't know if we mentioned that Amanda Seyfried plays Elizabeth Holmes, backed up by a kind of an amazing cast of character actors, plus Naveen Andrews as Sunny Balwani. Let's hear a little bit. Dylan, we're going to play A2 here. So this is a little conference between Amanda, Sunny, and two of the other people at Theranos.
The device wasn't working. We couldn't fix it. So I had somebody send in fake test results from a test we'd done before. It's going to work. It just didn't that day. I didn't know what to do.
When we get the box to work, we're not even gonna remember this. We'll be geniuses, and you'll be able to tell this story at a conference wearing flip-flops.
Don't tell anyone else.
Just you.
Good.
Okay. I don't feel things the way other people feel things.
I know.
So we need to talk a little bit about how this works as a series. You have other options. Bill Yousman, people can, if they choose, also on HBO, watch the Alex Gibney documentary, The Inventor, where you see all the real people. This one is peopled with really kind of a who's who of great American character actors: Bill Irwin, Elizabeth Marvel, Mary Jean Raskob, Stephen Fry in a really amazing performance. Kate Burton is in both of the things we're talking about right now. William Macy, Laurie Metcalf, Lisa Gay Hardman, who is having quite an experience. Lisa Gay Hamilton, excuse me, who's having quite an experience right now because she's in Winning Time too. And then ultimately Sam Waterston, who I want to talk about separately, at least for my own part near the end. But Bill, so this version of it, which tracks, I think, more closely to reality and truth than Inventing Anna does, is it a good way to tell the story? Do they tell the story effectively?
I think for the most part they do. It's kind of funny. You and I went in slightly opposite directions.
We did. We crossed.
And this came out in our emails where at first I was really into it and you were very skeptical of it. And then you ended up really liking it. And I ended up still liking it. But I mentioned like I would give it like a solid B or B plus. I do think it goes on. This is what I would say about both of these, and you brought this up as well. I think it goes on a little bit too long. And so I found myself, as I watched all of it, kind of ebbing and flowing. I was also binging it. So maybe I just got tired of that aspect of it. But for the most part, I think it holds together well. I think Seyfried's performance is really great. She already has those enormously huge eyes, and she uses them to great effect to both show kind of her charisma to pull people in, but also her intensity, which really gets very close to insanity. There are places in it where you really do see her unraveling, and the whole place kind of becomes cult-like, wearing masks of her face and doing these crazy dances and stuff. But as a dramatic series, I think it holds up quite well, and it's quite well constructed.
All right. We only have a short amount of time left because of the pledge thing, so I want to just continue on this a little bit. I don't know. Mercy, tell me how you think it worked as a series. What did you like or not like?
So oddly, I think it's fantastic. And I think it carries over for me from the podcast, because the podcast was beautifully designed. The narration of the podcast, the sound of the podcast, all of that was beautiful. And I think I actually told, in this week while interviewing someone for our new podcast, Mercy and the Dude, I actually told the dude that watching the Dropout with your, like certain scenes with your eyes closed, the scoring carries the entire feeling for the scene for you. And it's just, exactly what's going on. Some really tense scenes between her and Sonny, some really excellent work with the rest of the cast. I mean, it is scored beautifully. I think it is filmed beautifully. I think it works really well as a piece. I do understand what you're saying, Bill, that it goes on a bit too long, but then I think about there are a couple pieces that I just can't live without, like that closing scene of Elizabeth Holmes getting into the Uber. I couldn't live without.
So, Tanisha, how about you?
See, I feel like you're saying that because you don't want to listen to Amanda Seyfried's voice of Elizabeth Holmes. So you closed your eyes and just listen to the music because you were like, I can't with the voice thing.
It was intolerable. It was insufferable.
It's bad. Yeah.
Someone get her a lozenge.
So Tanisha, as a producer director, how does this work as drama?
You did the worst thing by sharing the documentary. And so after I watched the series, I looked at the documentary, and I will just say to the people, from this person's perspective, the documentary is so much better. But I think it's because you get to see, as opposed to seeing an actor portraying a human, you get to see the human. And there are just some things that happen behind Elizabeth Holmes's eyes when being asked sometimes innocuous questions and sometimes deeper questions that just tell a whole nother story that is really hard for an actor to do. So while as a piece of drama and entertainment, yeah, sure, add it to the queue list of 1,000 things you have in your queue list, but I would put the documentary ahead of.
One thing I would say is I watched, if you're going to do them both, I do the series first and then the documentary, because I think it throws you off if you see the reality first. As we head into break here, what I want to say is I think there's amazing performances. I just mentioned a whole bunch of them all the way through. Sam Waterston, he plays George Schultz, one of the really prominent people taken in by this. Sam Waterston is just a great actor anyway. I mean, just is really good. Mm-hmm. This is some of the best acting I've ever seen. And in a way, what really pulls this thing together for me towards the end is sort of the pain still muddled with a kind of arrogance that he pulls out of this George Schultz character. You know, Schultz was this very, very smart and largely principled person who nonetheless spent an awful lot of his life making excuses for appalling behavior here by people even more important than him. And there's a way which Waterston just gets so perfectly how Schultz can't get out of that role, even when he's dealing with this, underaged inventing whiz kid. So anyway, I wound up liking the Dropout way more than I thought I was gonna. Let's take a break here. Please support the show while we're on the air. It always helps the show.
Wanna pull my hair, break my back. For the right money, might sit in your lap. Back to back, I can't even keep track. It's a fact that freaks need to get slapped. Suck my toes and need a back rub. I don't come to do it, I just wanna be touched. Look at how y'all making me blush. I'm enough to go around so people don't push. Wanna run that tush in the bush.
Welcome back. This is The Nose, our special Fraudster TV edition. Our panel today is Bill Yousman, Professor of Media Studies at Sacred Heart University, Tanisha Dugan, Associate Professor at Octopus Theatricals, Mercy Quay, founder of the Narrative Project, and soon to be heard hosting a podcast within the Connecticut Mirror Cinematic Universe with John Dankosky. Working title, Mercy and the Dude. I don't know whether that's etched in stone yet. I would have to say in the Connecticut Mirror Cinematic Universe, Pazniokis Man is still my favorite show. I mean, he's like my favorite superhero just in general. All right, so we are talking about Inventing Anna, 9-part Netflix series, limited series. Shonda Rhimes at the helm, so success is essentially guaranteed at this point. She sort of doesn't fail. And this is the story of a fraudster who successfully deceived members of the New York elite, and perhaps not so elite. She was really good, actually, at seducing what we might call the little people. Her real name, Anna Sorokin. Her fake name, Anna Delvey. She was sort of an Instagram-driven German heiress, but not really, who ultimately was able to take some people for some money. Although I think it's worth pointing out just at the beginning, before we get into what the panel thought, for Anna Delvey or Anna Sorokin's, for her ill-gotten gains to be equal to Elizabeth Holmes's, you have to add not 1 0, not 2 0. You have to add 3 zeros to Anna's money before you're even anywhere in the ballpark of Theranos. So, I mean, really, it isn't sort of at the same level. So, Tanisha Dugan, let's talk about this. It's driven by 2 major performances by women. Anna Chlumsky as Vivian Kent, a sort of fictionalized version of the journalist one of the journalists who gets inside Anna, and then Julia Garner, she of Ozark and The Americans and other stuff, as Anna Delvey Sorokin. How did this one work for you?
This one works a little better for me, but I'm definitely more crass and vain than the Theranos story offers. I love a story about clothes and traveling and ridiculousness. So this one, thematically, it was already where I want to live. I think Garner has a heavy lift, much like Amanda Seyfried and Seyfried.
Seyfried, whatever.
Oh, yeah. In that, like, both of these women, for my money, are obnoxious. And so it's like, hard to be likable. And so I think Anna Chlumsky sort of wins in that case because I think the reporter is just an easier character to like than Anna. But I dug it. And of course, I dug it as much because I knew many of the actors in it, and I'm always happy to see my friends' work. So there's that.
Yeah, although I think, let me just stay with you for one more second on this, just because there's a sort of an interesting theatrical question. So both of these performances, I'm talking about Julia Garner and Amanda Seyfried in The Dropout, these are incredibly mannered performances because the characters are incredibly bizarrely mannered. I mean, Holmes has that weird voice. Holmes supposedly never blinks. I mean, people talk about this all the time in real life, and then you've got Julia Garner doing this accent that Sorokin had. She's kind of dropped some of it in the ensuing years. Bill Yousman memorably referred to it as baby Esperanto. But so the trick is to have it not be an impersonation, to have it ultimately be in character. And so, Tanisha, I would argue that both of them get past this is pure impersonation of the weird manners and into real character work. But I'm also interested in knowing what you thought.
I mean, well, I think that's the gag, because in so many ways, these real human beings were caricatures, right? Like they just are. And we find out with both of these women, you talk about it with Anna, and we also know this to be true about Elizabeth Holmes, that even they struggled with keeping up the persona, the characters they had created for themselves. So I do think as an actor, there's a bit of a box that you're inside of, because you're playing a person who's playing a person. And there's just a remove that I think is difficult to navigate. So yeah, I can give them a pass a bit, but it's hard. It's a hard thing. And it's also curious to me as just a producer or creator, like this interest in going down this road of people playing people, that are so far from truth.
Before we hear from Bill and from Mercy, let's hear a little clip from the show. You're going to hear Anna Klumsky as Vivian Kent, the journalist, Julia Garner as Anna Delvey. We're doing B1, Dylan.
Anna, I want to clarify some of this confusion. Everyone I spoke to, every single person, described you very differently. Almost as if all of them were talking about a lot of different people instead of just one person. What do you think about that?
I have a question.
Okay.
I looked at some stuff about you from the internet, and I see some pictures. And I wonder, what do you wear?
Huh?
Why do you dress like that? Like that. What are you wearing? You look poor.
This is a nice... Anna, you're wearing... What are those? Coveralls?
I'm in prison, but I still accessorized it and had it pressed.
It's hard not to laugh at that. So, Bill Yousman, you're up next. At some point, I want to talk about the relationship between the reporter and the subject. We don't have to do that necessarily right now, but just give me your overall reactions to how this one worked for you.
Well, I first have to confess that a few weeks ago, my wife, Lori, suggested that we watch this show. And when I read what it was about, I kind of went, no, I don't think that's for me. And I passed. So she felt very vindicated when Jonathan McNichol called me to assignment, and then I had to go back and watch it. She had already watched it and really enjoyed it. It's also the first thing she said to me when she met me was, why do you dress like that? So in my home, there's all sorts of extra stuff going on. I did enjoy it also. I'll give it another solid kind of B or B plus. The tone is so different than the other one. I said that I feel like The Dropout is almost horror. And this has all of the breeziness and glitz that Shonda Rhimes always brings to all of her stuff. And so it does, I think, kind of slide by. Even though, again, I think it's a little bit too long, 9 episodes. There's some self-indulgence there, but it also has some humor. As we heard in the clip that we just heard, I found myself laughing out loud at some of the other stuff that occurs in later episodes. So I do think it holds together well, and the performances are great. And I do love Klumsky in this as well. And as you mentioned, that relationship between her and Anna is really, really fascinating.
Yeah, Mercy, for me, this is interesting too, because, both of these things are about people kind of inserting themselves into the world of the super rich and getting things out of them. Although one thing about Inventing Anna and about the actual story itself was she did a lot of her grifting with rich people, but some of it with little people too. I mean, I don't know about you, Mercy. My anxiety quotient ratcheted way up with the Moroccan $62,000 hotel bill on the charge card of some young woman who clearly didn't have that kind of money. This was a little bit about getting the little people, the people who can get you past the front desk of a hotel or whatever, getting those people on your side, but not maybe taking them all that seriously.
Yeah, I think that once Anna's schemes or, her manufactured personality no longer resonated with the real New York socialites, she tried her hands with folks that she could impress. And she, surrounded herself with folks that were actually deeply impressed with her, right? She ran through her early friends. She ran through Val and Chase, and she ran through the woman who gave her access to the yacht. She ran through the real wealth. And all that was left to keep up the rouge was these normal people who couldn't see right through it. And I love the progression of the character. And I love the progression of Julia Garner portraying the character, because, she goes back and forth from being really well polished to being infantilized, to being a businesswoman, to going back to being infantilized. And you have this sort of double dutch happening with the character that, for me, fleshes her out.
Double dutch.
Yeah. That's right. That fleshes her out a great deal. And because this is a Shonda Rhimes, hey, I want to just say, she gets the old gang back together. You got some Katie Lowe's, Jeff Perry, Anna DeVere, right? So there's like the old gang is back together. But one thing I got to knock her for is a lot of the production work looked very similar to Scandal, split screens, right? The shutter clicking, camera action. She kind of used really funky transitions that at a certain point just felt jarring to me. But I think narrative wise, it works for me. I think that, there's a great deal here to like.
I just want to make two kind of observations more as a guest than a host. One of them is that both of these series deal also with some of the manipulative aspects of journalism, Inventing Anna more so. I mean, there's kind of two grifts going on. And the other one involves Anna Chlumsky's character, this journalist trying to manipulate and get Anna Delphi to trust her, while also trying to keep the story alive at her magazine, which is it's kind of similar. You see a lot of that going on in the Wall Street Journal. In the Dropout, the guy who plays John Kerry, who is ultimately just trying constantly with Lisa K. Hamilton's character to keep the story from getting killed. How do you keep it alive? And sometimes you want to hold on to your sources and get them to stay on the record, even at their own peril. I think both of these series kind of explore what Janet Malcolm wrote about that in The Journalist and the Murderer. And the other thing I want to do is invoke the William Goldman rule and say that in both of these cases, but especially in Inventing Anna, Goldman always says that the more eccentric role is easier. It's scenery chewing. It's easier to play than the person who kind of sells the whole premise to the audience. He would use Dustin Hoffman versus Tom Cruise, and said Cruise in Rain Man had to do the heavy lifting of getting us to sort of buy the entire premise. And I do think that Chlumsky's work in Inventing Anna is kind of in that category. But, the other thing, we have a brief amount of time here, but, Tanisha, one thing they used to say about within Seinfeld, on the set of Seinfeld, is no hugs, no learning, or no lessons. And I feel like both of these series are about people who are not going to learn their lessons. Anna Delvey, I think, Anna Sorokin has an art exhibit up right now. She just got out of ICE detention. She's got an art exhibit up. Elizabeth Holmes is just keeping on Elizabeth Holmesing in every possible way. If we want these people to learn stuff, maybe we're going to the wrong place.
Yeah, but I don't think that, like, biologically, these are people who have to learn stuff, right? Like, that's just not how the world is built for them. So there's nothing surprising inside of them continuing on, because there's an audience for them always, right? There's forgiveness for white women always. So I don't know if we come to either of those shows with a sense of redemption, of trying to find that. I think, for me, I go to it, one, for lessons to learn, because while we may armchair psychology our way into who these women are, they are telling us a tale of how one can find a thing, how to live outside of imposter syndrome, how to beat back what that can do to a person. So I think, if anything, if there are lessons to be learned, it's how to dream wildly and blindly and with your full throat and chest and body, and that's not a bad thing until it becomes harmful to others.
Right, and you can't have imposter syndrome if you really are an imposter. So Bill,
maybe,
I don't know. So Bill, we just point out New York has this so-called son of Sam law that means that Anna Delvey can't or Anna Sorokin can't profit from her crimes. I think that $325,000 she sold her life rights to Netflix for could be used to pay legal fees and restitution to some of her victims, but she can't get any money from it. On the other hand, I'm starting to wonder about the exalting of these stories, Like I just am flat out not going to watch the Jared Leto and Hathaway We Crashed thing. I'm not going to watch any more of this stuff, I don't think, for a while. I just sort of wonder what this is all about and whether it's a good thing.
Yeah, I wonder about that too. And I'm not necessarily particularly interested in this becoming like a very dominant subgenre of true crime. And I do think there's a parallel there to the true crime stuff as well. All these people who become obsessed with serial killers and the Mansons and all of that. Like, I don't know how great that is for a social structure either. Or the reverse side of it, there's a lot of shows about like these independent internet sleuth vigilantes who are going after unsolved crimes. I worry a lot about that too, because that really is just, digital vigilantism. And I feel like those people are held up as heroes a lot. So I do think there are those sociological questions.
All right. So Mercy, we're almost out of time here. I don't know if you were going to tell people to watch one or the other of these things, which one would you send them to?
Oh my goodness, I can't do that. I thought both of these were excellent. I thought that they were both great for different reasons. I do agree that The Dropout felt more like a suspenseful horror, and what is this one called? Inventing Anna felt more like watching a crash in slow motion, which is something adjacent to trauma porn. And I just really. One thing we haven't talked about in this episode yet is the really great journalism depicted in both of these pieces. And for me, journalism being my first love, right? The couple things that really resonated with me was like this hunger for the story, absolutely. But one thing that didn't resonate with me was this depiction of this like this animistic relationship between the reporter and an editor. I never felt that way in newsrooms in Connecticut. I think that the scriberia depicted in Inventing Anna is hilarious to me. I can absolutely say that there was a scriberia in the New Haven Register, but that scriberia was the wealth of knowledge that was carried there. Right, like, and I wouldn't describe it as scriberia at all, but these seasoned reporters, Mary O'Leary, Mark Brackenberry, Matt Dorenzo, right? I never had these contentious relationships with either fellow reporters or editors they would actually be pushing me to say, all right, this is something that is a hole in your thinking. So I think if you're a reporter, if you're a journalist at all, watch both of them and really indulge in that side of the work. If you are interested in something more contemporary and astonishingly relatable, maybe watch Inventing Anna, because the way she swindles even regular people to even today still believe that she is who she says she is something to marvel at, certainly.
All right, we got to take a break right here. We'll come back. We'll make some recommendations. We're back. Today is the birthday of our boss, Katie Tolarski, whose vacation plans were somewhat derailed. But happy birthday to someone who shares a birthday with Maisie Williams, better known as Arya Stark. They're both badasses who are not tall. All right. Also, thanks to Dylan Reyes. He's in here sitting in for the big shoes of Kat Pastor as our technical producer. And thanks to Jonathan McPants, who always produces The Nose, at least whenever possible. All right. So Bill, Mercy, and Tanisha all have recommendations to make. Tanisha, why don't you get us going?
I've only got one. I'm gonna endorse Chloe Bailey, who has been like a slow burn for me. I didn't like jump into her as an artist, but I really like her new single "Treat Me," and yeah, like I love a 20-year-old girl doing the most. It's awesome. Chloe Bailey.
All right, Chloe Bailey, good one. Bill Yousman, how about you?
So both the shows we talked about today are, streaming or premium subscription cable. Suddenly I find myself more than usual watching some shows that are just on regular old broadcast or cable TV. So I just want to mention three really quickly. Three shows right now, just regular weekly shows that I'm thoroughly enjoying are Abbott Elementary, Atlanta, and Better Things. Each one has a completely different tone and feel than the others, but all three of them are really, really smart and really insightful into very relevant kind of contemporary, the way we're living now. And so I'm just finding all three of them really interesting and absorbing. And I think I'm also interested in how, is this a resurgence in non-streaming TV? I don't know. It could just be a coincidence, but all three are great.
I'm convinced it's not a coincidence, and my N of one basis for this is that Sam Hadelman, who's the cool kid on the nose, he's always kind of a little bit ahead of us. And Sam has been talking to me about those shows and the idea of network television kind of coming back for 2-3 months now. So, and we are definitely going to do an episode of The Nose that addresses this. Mercy Quay, also one of the cool kids on the nose, although Sam, as you know, is very hard to compete with on that basis.
I'm sure he'll be very happy to hear you say that. So this week was really hard to find a space recommendation, but I did. I feel pretty good about what I've put together. So Nicole Stott's book, Back to Earth, What Life in Space Taught Me About Our Home Planet. Nicole Stott is a retired NASA astronaut, and it's a bit of a memoir and a bit of, life lessons, cross into self-help in the sense of, existentialism when it comes to what we need to protect the Earth. Then there's Marvel's Moon Knight, which has recently released. There's 2 episodes out and it's releasing weekly. So certainly recommending that. And then just finally, Obama's narrating a show on Netflix. I haven't seen it, but I want to endorse most things Obama's doing. And certainly endorse anything that has to do with our nation's, our national parks. And so this is called, About Our National Parks by Obama. Oh, I'm sorry, Our Great National Parks. And it premiered this week. Obama is narrating the entirety of it. And it gives some Neil deGrasse Tyson from the previews that I've seen. So I'm sure it will not disappoint.
All right. Thanks to all three of you. Very, very quickly, I have to endorse Elizabeth Williamson's book, Sandy Hook, An American Tragedy and the Battle for Truth. She will be on the show Monday. This is an amazing book. Obama's in it, obviously. And that's all I have time to say. But please support us when the people ask.
On the radio, baby.